We were talking about the Qur'an. Now, the Qur'an is a holy book of the Muslims. You'll see it spelled different ways. I typically use the spelling with a Q, but sometimes you'll see it spelled Koran. The other documents we're talking about are the Hadith, and the Hadith are the literature that's written about the life of Muhammad. One of the most prominent ones, the one that I own and I've read through about a third of at this point, is Sahih al-Bukhari, and so that is just kind of a very authorized collection of the life of Muhammad. And so let's just get into this a little bit. Like I said, the Quran is going to be broken up into the Meccan and the Medinan surah, and surah is just the name for the chapters of the Quran. We said there was a different way to order them, and so these are two different ways to order the Meccan surah. And again, they are divided in the first, second, and third parts here. The third, again, is the beginning of his public ministry up to the Hijrah, which is that exile that we talked about. And you got the surah, basically the start of his ministry. Like I said, there's really no difference there in the second, but the third is the beginning of his public ministry through to the Hijrah. If you're looking for a good source on this, I would recommend James White has a book that he's put out, What Every Christian Needs to Know About the Quran. What I appreciate about James White, and I know there's some people who disagree with him, he at least gives Islam a fair shake. He treats it with balanced scales. He doesn't treat it by any standard he wouldn't want Christianity treated by, which means he's going to take its religious literature serious. He's going to approach it in a very historic way to say, what does history tell us? What can we understand about the humanness of Muhammad and some of the teachings of Muhammad, and do they line up with the Bible? And so he's gonna have quite a bit to say on the matter. I direct you also to Acts 27 Apologetics with David Wood. He's a little more of a firebrand if you're into that type of apologetics. And so those two guys are going to do a lot for discussing Islam. I may give you some sources I would avoid, but I have read through a good chunk of Sahih al-Bukhari and a few other things on Islam, so hopefully this will be helpful to you. But those are some of the locations that I've gotten some of this material from. And then you have various other Muslim apologetics. And so James White has interacted with some. David Wood has interacted with some. And so those would be some good videos for you to go check out if you want more information on this. Now, the Meccan surahs are the first part. The Medinan surahs are the second part. This is done after the exile, so after the Hijrah. They are the last 24 chapters of the Quran, at least chronologically speaking. The Muslim community in Arabia was growing into a major position, and so some of the dialogue directed to them will change because it's not so much a minority religion anymore. Now it's getting to be a majority religion, and so they don't necessarily have to be advocating so much for peace, and then they're actually going to have a little bit of power and authority to push back at the polytheists, which is, again, if there's one thing that Islam is like extremely like potent against, it's the idea of polytheism. They will fight against that very much, to the point, that they are basically saying you are not to worship any god but Allah, and anyone who refuses, there's some punishments that'll come with that. Now, some characteristics of these Medinan surahs. They are more of a focus on jihad. Now, jihad has a whole bunch of different meanings. It can mean a warfare type struggle. It can mean a personal struggle. But by the context, it really does seem to be more of a warfare type struggle. You can go back and forth with various Islamic scholars on the meaning of the word jihad. And again, depending on whether you're Sunni or Shia, which are the two major branches of Islam, you are obviously going to have a different perspective on some of that as well. And the way the Sunnis and the Shiites work, is they are going to actually look at the hadith and accept different hadith. And that's where you get their difference in doctrine. They both accept the Quran. They're both going to accept some hadith, but some are going to really find the difference depending on which hadith they consider authoritative. And that's where the main difference is going to fall. It is going to be more on legal and religious matters, and so you can see it's not so much training what the new religion is, but how to live it now. It'll mention things like hypocrites and hypocrisy. Since there are a lot more of them, there are a lot more believers. It'll start off with, "O you who believe." The length of each verse starts to grow. The vocabulary becomes a little bit easier. Begins arguing with Christians and Jews, and Christians specifically are known as the people of the book, and it will start condemning non-Muslims. And so some of those are the main shifts. So as you're reading the Quran, it could be confusing to read it out of order, because, like I said, it is set up in size order rather than chronological order. And so that's the way this is arranged. The Quran was memorized by Muhammad's followers. There were various scraps and bones and other things that they jotted some of it down on. And it wouldn't be until after Muhammad's death that they'd finally sit down and write it all out. And then they'd collect all the scraps that were left over and get rid of them so that there was only one version of the Quran. And so that's why you only have, theoretically, one version of the Quran, because all opposing versions were collected together and destroyed. Now, Muslim apologetics, Muslim apologists, sorry, I can't say that word, they are going to approach it more of there was a dialect, like a dialect issue. But if that was the case, why would they be so concerned about collecting up all the written stuff? And there seems to be more of a there was different wording, because as you study out some of the various people who knew the Quran, some people would say like, ooh, that guy knew different verses, or that guy had a whole nother chapter. And so that's not just a dialect issue. That's potential contradiction. So as we get into the collection of the Quran, there's some backstory there as well. Now, Muhammad does die. He dies around the year 632. According to Yasir Qadhi, he had suffered about 4 years from his poisoning. So I said 2 earlier, but it's 4. And so Yasir Qadhi, he's going to be a guy you want to check out. He's a Muslim apologist. He's done some dialogues with James White, got James White in trouble. But he's going to have some good stuff to say as far as understanding Islam from a Muslim perspective. Now, once Muhammad dies, so that's 632, like I said, the Muslims have a lot of the Quran memorized. They know this thing by heart. In 633, there's a battle called Yamama, which is probably one of the best battle names ever. Over 700 Muslims who had memorized the Quran died in that battle. And so one of the guys by the name of Salim had specifically been entrusted to teach the Quran. And so they got nervous because here were people who were set up by Muhammad and others to teach the Quran, and they're dying in this battle. And so Abu Bakr, and we'll get into some of this, he ordered that the Quran be compiled into one place. And so that's what you see is after the death of Muhammad, they're going to start putting the Quran together and start putting together all this material. Now, well after this, that's when they're going to start putting down the writings about the life of Muhammad, which is the Hadith. But this is how the Quran gets put together. Now, let me just cover this with Abu Bakr. Now, this is from Sahih al-Bukhari. Now, the Sahih al-Bukhari is a massive volume. It takes up a third of my bookcase. A gorgeous volume. I must say this. I'm looking forward to getting Sahih Muslim, but I'm going to wait to do that until I finish Sahih al-Bukhari. I've been working on it for a few years. But according to Sahih al-Bukhari, and I'll explain why certain guys' names show up. It's the line of transmission. So in the Hadith, there are these things called lines of transmission. They're called isnad chains, if you want the technical term for it. The isnad chain is going to follow from Muhammad down through his companions and eventually come down to the person who writes it down. And al-Bukhari is the guy who wrote it down, years later. So according to Zayd ibn Thabit, and he puts this quote here in Sahih al-Bukhari. He says, Abu Bakr sent to me at the time when Yamama battles had witnessed the martyrdom of numerous companions. I found Umar ibn al-Khattab with him. Abu Bakr began, Umar has come to me and said, if in the Yamama battles, death has dealt most severely with the Qur'an, the reciters of the Quran. Sorry if I'm butchering any of the pronunciation. And I fear it will deal with them with equal severity in other theaters of war. As a result, much of the Quran will be gone. I am therefore of the opinion that you should command the Quran be collected. Abu Bakr continued. I said to Umar, how can we embark on what the Prophet never did? Umar replied that it was a good deed regardless, and he did not cease replying to my scruples until Allah reconciled me to the undertaking, and I became of the same mind as him. Zayd, you are young and intelligent. You used to record the revelations for Muhammad, and we know nothing to your discredit. So pursue the Quran and collect it together. By Allah, had they asked me to move a mountain, it would not have been weightier than what they requested of me now. So that's in Sahih al-Bukhari 4986. And so you can actually pull a volume down off the shelf, and they are actually arranged by those numbers, and so you can find where that is. Now, I'm going to leave you some links to kind of end this video off if you want to watch some videos on some of the spread of Islam. And so these two videos here would be of help to you if you really, really care to study out the spread of Islam. There is some people who say that it spread peacefully, but as you can see, you have the Battle of Yamama and some other battles. There was a good level of warfare. Some of it was defensive, but there was a lot of offensive warfare that took place. Islam conquered most of the area around it very, very quickly. And so these two videos are going to kind of help you with some perspective because I know even things like the Crusades are looked at as a black spot on the history of Christianity. But if you look at it from these guys' perspectives, they are going to have some different takes on it because the Crusades are just a few hundred-year window in over 1,000 years of Islamic aggression. So just some different perspectives, and maybe we'll get into that at a separate time. Thank you guys for joining me. This is episode 2 of our series on Islam. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. And again, I would recommend Acts 27 Apologetics and James White would be some good sources to continue. And then Yasir Qadhi if you want it from the Muslim side of things. All right, I thank you guys. Thank you for joining me. This is the Janus Project.